ba ma dalee commencé liggéey bi yokkute bu bari am nañ ko ci.
You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. Coming up on today's programme. Controversial Cambo, fossil fuel giant Shell withdraws its plans to develop the North Sea oil field. How climate intelligence can help increase resilience in cities at risk from the impacts of climate crisis. And the orphaned otters separated from their mums during bad weather now being released back into the wild. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show where we track the changes happening to our world right now and we challenge those who are coming up with the solutions. Now, Shell has scrapped plans to develop the Cambo oil field in the North Sea. That's after the project faced sustained criticism from environmental groups. The oil giant had a 30% stake in the site, but now says that the economic case for investment isn't strong enough, as our Scotland correspondent James Matthews reports.
It was a day for big energy news on the Cromarty Firth. Here at the port of Nig, they're building the UK's largest wind tower factory. Nicola Sturgeon came to announce it.
Thank you.
But what of the other big story in the energy world? Cambo, Shell and the company's pullout. Scotland's First Minister had said Cambo should not go ahead. Given your opposition to the development of the Cambo oil field, do you welcome Shell's withdrawal?
Well, Shell's made a commercial decision. I don't know what that will mean for the future of Cambo. The consenting for Cambo, of course, is not my decision. It's the UK government's decision. My view is absolutely anchored in the determination to transition those who currently work in oil and gas into other green, clean jobs for the future.
Shell said that after comprehensive screening of the Cambo field near Shetland, it concluded the economic case for investment isn't strong enough at this time. Environmental campaigners have welcomed the withdrawal of the 30% stakeholder, with some claiming it marks a beginning of the end for new oil and gas projects in the North Sea. While there is doubt over Cambo, it's by no means dead yet. Siccar Point is the company that owns the majority 70% stake in the project. It says it remains confident of Cambo and will continue to engage with the UK government about future development. The oil and gas industry at large has watched developments with concern.
Behind all of this, the need for oil and gas remains in the UK, and we can help provide that in a much more sound, climate-focused way than many other countries can do. Our own gas production is as third damaging as anyone else's. So by using home resources, we can really make an awful lot of good for the environment and also benefit the economy in doing so.
Cambo remains a work in progress, but it looks like a development more difficult today than it did yesterday. James Matthews, Sky News, at the port of Nig.
Well, we'll be discussing that later in the programme, but let's take a look at some of the day's other climate news now. And the UK government has ramped up plans to clamp down on illegal deforestation in its supply chains. A consultation announced today will look at new measures that could make it illegal for larger businesses to use commodities whose production is associated with large-scale deforestation. Supply of products such as beef, cocoa, soy, coffee and palm oil could be affected. Meanwhile, the UK's supply chain crisis isn't just taking a toll on the availability of products, it's affecting the environment as well. Carbon emissions at major seaports have reached their highest level since 2008. That's according to a new report from Singapore's Nanyang Technological University. Backlogs and delays are causing prolonged turnaround times, during which ships continue to emit harmful gases. British Airways will become the first airline in the world to use sustainable aviation fuel produced on a commercial scale in the UK. The fuel will be made from recycled cooking oils, greases and other household waste and could be in use as early as 2022. The airline has committed to powering 10% of its flights with sustainable fuel by 2030. Now, that would cut carbon emissions by around 80% compared to flying with traditional jet fuel.
The real beauty of sustainable aviation fuels is that they're a drop-in replacement for fossil-based jet fuel. So they can be used in aircraft now without the need for any changes, and passengers won't notice any difference. It's just like flying on normal fuel. The difference is that the maximum blend at the moment that we can put in of sustainable aviation fuel is a maximum of 50%, and depending on the fuel type, it may be a little less than that. But for now, we're just talking about kind of putting this into the supply network so that all of our flights can have a little bit of sustainable aviation fuel powering them.
And the singer Billie Eilish is this year's recipient of the honorary 2021 German Sustainability Award for her commitment to climate protection. She'll receive the award virtually via the German astronaut Matthias Maurer. Live from the International Space Station, Billie Eilish publicly advocates for climate protection and sustainability to her millions of followers worldwide. And two otters who were separated from their mothers during storms when they were little cubs are starting life in a new home. Buddy and Holly were rescued by the RSPCA in the spring of 2020. And after 15 months of rehabilitation, the now adult otters are ready for release back into the wild, with the River Ouse selected as their new habitat. Now, Sky News understands that Boris Johnson has pledged to use special legal powers to persuade electric vehicle manufacturer Rivian to establish a European base here in Britain. Our city editor, Mark Kleiman, has more.
This is an interesting development in the race to persuade electric vehicle makers to establish a major manufacturing presence in the UK. Now, I understand that Boris Johnson has written to the chief executive of Rivian, one of the world's biggest electric van makers, to encourage him to open a major new factory at a site near Bristol. Now, in this letter, the Prime Minister says that the government would use a special development order, which is a form of planning law, to make planning decisions for your project and ancillary infrastructure now and in the long term. This would be using a UK law, the Prime Minister goes on, that's rarely used and reflects the importance of your project to the UK. And Mr Johnson also said in this letter, details of which have been shared with me, that he has made it his personal priority to see Rivian choose the UK as its European home. Now, this comes as Rivian considers other sites elsewhere in Europe for this major manufacturing site. But of course, it comes at a time when the automotive industry globally is under pressure to electrify its production capabilities. And as we've seen from data on a frequent basis in recent years, electric car sales are rising both in absolute terms but also as a share of overall car sales. And data from New Automotive's electric car count that was published this week showed that November was the highest month on record for the market share of electric vehicles in the UK. So it would obviously be a major coup for the Johnson government if Rivian did choose to locate its new manufacturing site in the UK. Equally, it would be a blow if Rivian decides to go elsewhere in Europe.
Now, we are living in increasingly vulnerable cities. That's as climate change is pushing urban areas into climate zones that their infrastructure just isn't designed for. Well, that is the warning from the climate intelligence company Servest, which has been looking at how our cities could be at risk in the future. Well, let's have a look at what they found. Over the next 30 years, 75% of the world's major cities are expected to shift into different climate regimes. Well, that means London, for example, will feel more like Barcelona by 2050. Well, heavy rainfall is projected to increase in northern Europe, making severe city flooding more likely. For example, in Finland's capital of Helsinki, which is at particular risk due to winter melting and its coastal location. And as global temperatures continue to rise, cities will experience more heat waves. Well, they're becoming so frequent and intense that the Spanish city of Seville became the first to officially name and rank its heat waves earlier this year. And projections suggest that southern Europe will get drier. Cities like Athens in Greece are set to face more frequent and intense droughts by 2050. Well, Iggy Bassi is the founder and the CEO of the Climate Intelligence Service, Servest, and he joins me now. Iggy, good to see you this evening. The problem seems to be that cities are being hard hit by significant changes in their climate and the infrastructures just can't cope.
You're absolutely right. The infrastructure is aging, and if you think about the design of the infrastructure that fuels our cities, it never really been designed for these new types of risks. So in sort of many ways, the new risks are outperforming the engineering design. Now, that has pretty profound implications for us, the way we think about our work, the way we live, the way we play, the way we build new infrastructure. And also we have to think about fairly large-scale retrofitting of our most critical infrastructure across Europe. Something like 85% of people will be living in cities. I think it's about 2/3 across the world by 2050. Now, what does that mean for things like temperature? What does it mean for things like flood defenses? What does it mean for the NHS, for instance? We actually are looking at the NHS now to say, what would be the response times for things like heat waves? You just showed the brief clips of Spain. We're going to expect that across multiple countries simultaneously in the next couple of decades.
Yeah, I was mentioning a couple of cities in my introduction there, Iggy. Which cities would you say are leading the way with adaptation?
I think it's hard because I think most of the conversation to date has largely been about net zero, which is absolutely necessary, but there's been very little discussion and very little investment within adaptation. So even if you just take the UK government spend this year, it's been dwarfed by net zero versus adaptation. I think there should be some more funding available for adaptation. But cities in the sort of Nordics have been pretty good at start adapting. I was just in Helsinki yesterday, in fact. And I think they are making greater investments in things like insulation, home pumps, for instance, so new forms of energy. So the faster we can mix our energy within the cities, I think the better. But we haven't seen any wide-scale adoption of adaptation measures, frankly.
And the other problem as well is that we've got increased population pressure expected in cities.
You're right, but that's also an opportunity, Sam. There's also an opportunity to bring new technology to city. I mean, you can amortize that technology as more and more people are clustered together. I think it's a great opportunity to introduce new technologies where things like energy, so I think the challenge for lots of green technology is that they don't quite know where all that demand will come from. Cities offers a great opportunity to lower the cost very quickly to drive adoption. Now, that does require some sort of public-private partnership as well, because some of these technologies are quite uncertain. So it's incumbent upon cities, and there's been some great movements, things like the C40, for instance, where they have been introducing new technologies, pooling their spending power together. I think Sadiq Khan just last week had about $1 billion worth of zero-emission buses sent to Latin American cities, for instance. So I think cities are not waiting for central government. They are moving forward where they can.
OK, Iggy Bassi, sounds like there are some things to be hopeful about. Good to talk to you this evening. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, do stay tuned, because coming up after the break, I'll be joined by Dame Julia King from the Committee on Climate Change and the Director of Anti-Poverty Charity War on Want, Asad Rehman. We're going to be discussing if fossil fuels are falling out of favour and whether our energy infrastructure is resilient, what we were just talking about there, to withstand the changing climate.
I've teamed up with HP and the Arbor Day Foundation, who last year planted 1 million trees and this year plan to plant 1 million more. Now, 1 million trees sounds like a huge amount, But we need more. We're currently lagging way behind Europe, 13% compared to 38%. We need to up our game, basically, and we need to start reforesting huge tracts of land that have been denuded of trees over the years. We need to be very careful about the type of trees that we plant, ensuring that it's native species, learning from our past mistakes. But there are still huge tracts of land that can be replanted, reforested. And that's why I've teamed up with HP and Arbor Day to try and encourage people to get behind this. If more businesses would start thinking about the positive effect that trees can have, carbon capture for our mental health, there are so many benefits that come from them. It seems to me to be a very obvious thing that we could target. Now, of course, there are many tree planting campaigns, and I'm sure lots of your viewers will have heard about tree planting initiatives over the years. But just imagine if every single person in the UK started planting 10, 20, 30 trees, we would be making a huge difference. I've seen a growing tide of people who really do feel passionate about making a difference. We're hearing about all the negatives, but here is something that we can actually do with our own hands. We can actually make a positive difference. We can actually get into the ground and start planting those trees. I can't reiterate enough that you need to be careful about what kind of trees you plant. We don't want any species anywhere. You need to think about the biodiversity and using native species. But I think we need to go back to that. I think if we could have a big campaign where everyone got behind it, I think it could be something that would empower people and put a smile on people's faces. HP, who have got behind this campaign, have committed to plant 3 trees for every comment left on the video on my Instagram account. Now, this is one part of their forest positive initiative. This is about trying to become carbon neutral and trying to empower people and give people the opportunity to actually make a difference.
I love my job because I get to do something that is contributing to a better future.
Did you know that driving us to school creates extra toxic air at drop-off and pick-up times?
Early rain will clear eastern parts of England on Saturday morning to leave a mix of sunny spells and showers. Some of the showers will be heavy with hail, thunder and even some snow, mainly over the hills. It will feel very cold with a significant wind chill in the strong and gusty winds. The showers will merge into longer spells of rain, sleet and hail snow, especially in eastern Scotland and northern England. The brisk winds and frequent showers will help keep air pollution levels low on Saturday, between 1 and 3 on the Daily Air Quality Index.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. And we're getting straight to discussing those climate issues of the day. That's with the chair of the Adaptation Subcommittee of the Committee on Climate Change, Dame Julia King, and the director of the anti-poverty charity War on Want, Asad Rayman. Good to see you both this evening. We are starting with the news that we heard earlier in the programme that Shell has announced that it is pulling out of the Cambo oil field project, saying that the economic case for investment was just not strong enough. Campaigners have called it a death blow for Cambo as the project continues to lose support. So is this the clearest sign yet that fossil fuels are falling out of favour? Come first to you, Dame Julia. 30% of the investment has been pulled out. 70% of it, though, is still there. Is it really a death blow?
Well, I'm hoping it is. I'm hoping other people will see that Shell have done the economic analysis and that if we're on a path to no more than 2 degrees and ideally 1.5 degrees, this just won't be profitable. And really, you know, once we see industry recognizing these things aren't going to be profitable as we move to net zero, then that's brilliant, because that's what will really drive change.
And Assad, Shell says that this is an economic decision. Do you think it is, or do you think it's political?
Well, firstly, I think it's a huge victory for people power. Without the campaigners, we would not be in a situation where Shell was pulling out of this Cambo oil field. So, of course, the fight isn't won. The UK government can still approve the oil field, along with the countless others that are in the pipeline. But it does give us hope. And it shows us that when citizens work together collectively and put pressure on both these dirty polluting companies as well as our government, we can begin to see an end to fossil fuels. Because we've got to remember what the climate scientists have told us. We can have no new oil, gas or coal if we want to meet the 1.5 degree threshold, which is critical to prevent the runaway catastrophic climate change that we are beginning to see all over the world.
Yeah, that was the IEA report, wasn't it? And Dame Julia, to you, if we accept that it is an economic decision from Shell, what does it tell us about the intentions of these big fossil fuel companies? Is it the start of a big shift?
Well, I hope that's what it's showing us, because of course we do need the skills of these companies. We need their skills for hydrogen production. We need their skills for carbon capture and storage. So if this is really the start of these high carbon energy companies recognizing that that the economics have changed and they've got to become green, low carbon energy companies, then that's really brilliant. And that says it doesn't matter whether governments say we should support this or not. If the companies have recognised the economics have changed and that changes their businesses, then the change will happen.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch, isn't it? And Assad, of course, all of these big projects, very capital intensive. They all need a lot of money. And what we learnt in Glasgow at COP26 is that $130 trillion worth assets under management committed to net zero. But that's only 40% of the world's asset under management. So 60% of those assets are still happy, as far as we understand, to invest in fossil fuel projects.
Absolutely, and they're continuing to invest, and the irony being that some of those who are claiming that they're going to be investing in renewable or clean energy are at the same time pouring billions and billions into dirty energy. But look, the economic case. One of the ways to change that economic case, of course, is fixing our tax system. The UK has got a very generous tax system to dirty energy companies. Companies like Shell, for example, paid no tax last year in the UK. We know that governments are handing over something like $11 million per minute to dirty energy companies in subsidies. We're in trade deals like the Energy Treaty Charter, which locks us into decades of fossil fuels and even has this thing called corporate courts, investor state dispute settlement courts, which allows companies to sue governments if they take actions that threaten their profits. These are all the enabling systems that governments allow and create, which allow these fossil fuel companies to operate. I mean, it's in a ridiculous situation at the moment where the Netherlands, the Dutch government, is being sued for billions because their government has planned to phase out coal-powered power stations. And it's estimated that some of these polluting companies are threatening to sue governments for up to $9 trillion in the coming years. So really, it's government regulation and government intervention which changes the economic argument.
I said I'm going to jump in there because I want to talk about the second topic this evening, where thousands of people across the north of England and Scotland are still without power. That's a week on from Storm Arwen. And according to the Energy Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, climate change will make extreme weather events like this all the more common. It means that the focus is once again on resilience and how where we live needs to be adapted to withstand the climate change. Dame Julia, if we're going to have these big electrification projects, we need an electricity infrastructure which is sturdy and doesn't fall over, don't we?
We absolutely do, because as we move to net zero, we change our fuel use quite dramatically. So at the moment, about 15% of our energy comes from electricity. As we get towards net zero, that'll move to 60 to 70% of our energy coming from electricity. So it will be absolutely crucial that our electricity system is resilient, because when the electricity fails, everything will stop. And we know that things like storm are going to be becoming more common as the climate continues to change. And of course, it will continue to change until we get to net zero.
And Assad, even on the eve of COP26, we saw the train lines let loads of us down, stranded us all. Compared to other global cities, how are the cities in the UK faring, do you think, in terms of infrastructure for that transition?
So as Iggy, your previous guest, was saying, look, no city's infrastructure is fit for purpose when dealing with this climate crisis. And of course, these impacts are much deeper and happening far worse in countries of the global south who don't have the capacity or the resources to be able to deal with them. But you'll take Indonesia, for example. They're now planning to move their city, Jakarta, their capital city. We've seen, from Dhaka to New York to Venice to Bangkok, all of these cities under threat. And it's not simply about our energy infrastructure. Here in London, if we remember, we had heavy rainfall and our tube system was...
I'm sorry to jump in there, Assad. We are out of time. Dame Julia King, Assad Rehman, thank you very much indeed, both of you. That is all from us for this week. But coming up on Sky News tonight, we'll be answering all of your questions about the Omicron variant of COVID-19. That's with a panel of experts. Thanks for watching. See you next time.